The sun had not yet cleared the eastern ridge. The sky was the color of old copper, streaked with violet, and dew clung to every blade of grass across the wide valley, each drop catching the first faint light like scattered coins someone had forgotten to pick up. The river ran low and clear. Somewhere in the tree line a single bird called once, then stopped, as if it had thought better of it. Spring came to the Borderlands the way it always did here, not with ceremony, not with permission. It simply arrived, pushing up through the frost while no one was watching, and by the time anyone noticed, the ground had already decided. Beside a small, deliberate cook fire, Kaito crouched, stirring a clay pot with a stripped branch. He was thinner than he had been when he first came to this place. You could see it in the way his kimono hung at the shoulder, but his hands were steadier now, calloused. He no longer looked like someone who had nearly starved 3 weeks ago. He looked like someone who remembered it. 31 days had passed since the last supply cart from the capital, 46 since anyone had called this place anything other than the Edge. He glanced north. The mountains stood visible in the early light, dark and serrated and patient, and the carved road into them caught a blade of dawn and flashed once, like a signal no one had sent. Still there, he murmured to himself, not to the fire. He looked at the flames again and stirred. His jaw shifted, not quite a smile, not quite a frown. He kept looking at that road, he thought, and he did not know why he kept looking. What had been empty land was now, barely tentatively, a settlement. 5 structures, 2 of them with real roofs. The smell of fresh-cut cedar and tamped earth hung in the air. Someone had stretched a length of rope between 2 posts and hung wet cloth to dry. It was a small, ordinary thing. It was everything. Saya emerged from the largest structure, rolling her shoulders. Her hair was tied up but messily. She had slept with it bound and not bothered to redo it. She carried 2 wooden cups and crossed to Kaito without a word, setting one beside him. "You were up before the bird," she said. "The bird was late," he answered. She sat, pulling her knees up. "Sora fixed the bellows last night, worked until his hands bled a little, then kept going. Didn't tell anyone." "I know. I saw his wrappings this morning." She wrapped both hands around her cup and looked out at the structures, the roof lines against the copper sky, and something moved through her face that she did not name. "It looks like something." "Yeah," he breathed. "Don't get proud of yourself. It's still 5 buildings and a rope." A small smile. "I know." The fire popped once into the silence. By mid-morning, Kenji arrived the way Kenji always arrived, from a direction nobody expected, cartwheels chattering against the gravel road, his blue-striped kimono somehow still bright despite everything. He was whistling something with no discernible melody, and his horse, a gray and disagreeable animal, ignored him entirely. Kenji called himself a merchant. He was also a rumor, a compass, and occasionally a problem. But he always brought news, and in the Borderlands, news was currency. "Oi!" he called out from 30 paces. "Is that rice I smell? Tell me that's rice!" "It's millet," Kaito said from the fire. "Close enough. Bless this place." He dismounted heavily, tied his horse to a post, the horse bit the post, and squatted beside the fire, warming his hands with theatrical relief. "Listen, before I eat, before I breathe, you need to hear this." "Sit down first," Kaito said calmly. "I am sitting. You're crouching. There's a difference." Kenji blinked, then actually sat, cross-legged on the dirt. He seemed briefly offended, then let it go. "There's a family. 2 days east along the river bend, former rice farmers, Tanaka lineage, clan dissolved after the flooding last autumn. 6 people. Oldest is maybe 50, youngest is 11. They've been sleeping in a field shelter since the new year. No clan, no papers, no protection." Kaito was quiet a moment, stirring the pot. "Why are you telling me?" "Because they asked me if there was anywhere to go." "And you said?" A pause, almost embarrassed. "I said I might know someone building something." A long beat passed. Saya, who had been listening from 3 paces away with no pretense of not listening, met Kaito's eyes. "We barely have enough shelter," she said. "I know. We have 4 functional sleeping spaces. Sora's still on the floor near the forge." "I know. So what are you going to—" "Go get them," he said quietly, cutting her off. She stared at him, not angrily, but as though trying to figure out what kind of fool said that, and whether she had been following the right kind. She looked away and breathed through her nose. "I'll need Kenji's cart." "Absolutely not," Kenji began. "Kenji," he wilted. "I'll need it back by the 5th day." The inn was the oldest structure there, not built by Kaito, but absorbed into whatever this place was becoming. Dark wooden beams, worn tatami, the smell of cedar oil, and something faintly medicinal. Afternoon light came through a paper screen in pale, even squares, and dust moved through it slowly, as if the air had learned patience. Oshi-san sat mending a screen panel on the floor, his needle moving steadily without hurry. He was the kind of old that had stopped being about age. "You came to ask me something," he said without looking up. Kaito sat across from him. "How do you feed more people than you planned for?" "Same way you feed the right number," the old man replied, still mending. "You just do it with less for yourself." Kaito watched the needle. "What if there isn't enough less?" Ochi-san looked up now, gentle. "Then you make more? Or you go hungry for a season and learn what that teaches you." He set down the needle and regarded Kaito with an expression that held something complicated, not quite pride, not quite sorrow, something that had been both. The first people who ever called a place home, they didn't do it because they had enough. They did it because they chose not to leave. The paper screen shifted in a faint draft. The dust in the light moved, then settled. "I was exiled," Kaito said very quietly. "I didn't choose to come here." "No," a long pause. "But you're choosing to stay." In the late afternoon, Sora was at the forge, and it was genuinely a forge now, with low stone walls, a real bellows, river clay reinforcement still drying in patches. His hands were wrapped in oiled cloth. He did not acknowledge Kaito's arrival. He was hammering a bracket for the second roof beam, small work, essential work, the kind that held everything else up. Sora had never asked to be here. He had run from an apprenticeship that had become something closer to captivity, 16 years old with excellent hands and terrible luck, until those two things had brought him here. "How's the wrist?" Kaito asked. "Fine," Sora said, not stopping. "Kenji said you worked until it bled." He stopped, but did not turn. "It wasn't much blood." He set down the hammer and looked at his hands, a quiet shame in his posture, the shame of someone expecting to be scolded and waiting for it. "I'm not angry at you," Kaito said. Sora turned now. "Then what?" "I need you healthy, not for me, for yourself. But also, we're about to have more people here, and the forge is going to matter more than it ever has, and you can't hammer with a split wrist." Sora absorbed this, 16, and still learning the difference between being needed and being valued. "How many more people?" "I don't know yet." A breath that became something almost like a laugh. "You never know, do you?" "Almost never." Sora picked the hammer back up, but differently now, like someone who had been reminded why. At dusk, Kaito stood alone at the northern edge where the settlement ended and the wild began. The mountains were turning purple-black in the fading light. The carved road swallowed into shadow. But he knew where it was. Wind moved through the tall grass around him, and it sounded like something breathing. He had heard the stories about the demon kingdoms, as all children of the Empire had. Monsters. Devourers. The reason you did not go north. But the stories always came from people who had never gone north. He reached into his kimono and withdrew a small folded paper, worn at the creases, soft as cloth from handling. He did not open it. He simply held it, the forged seal, his stepmother's work. He had kept it because throwing it away felt like pretending it hadn't happened, and pretending had not helped him yet. He folded it smaller and returned it to his kimono. His father was still out there somewhere, he thought, moving through the Empire on duty, not knowing. Or not knowing yet. Maybe he knew, and it was... He stopped the thought, turning his head as if physically redirecting it. No, later. That was for later. Behind him he heard the faint sound of Kenji's cartwheels beginning to turn on the gravel. Seiya leaving. He did not turn to watch, but his shoulders just slightly released. He looked north one more time, at the mountains, the dark carved road, and somewhere beyond it, something that was supposed to be monstrous. The grass breathed. He turned back toward the firelight. Later, dinner had come and gone, its remains stacked in bowls, the fire in the hearth burned down to orange coals. Mama-san had arrived at some point and sat at the head of the low table like someone who had come to a council meeting in her own home, her iron-gray hair pinned with a single lacquered comb. 6 people from the Tanaka line, she said. Rice farmers. Yes. We have no rice paddies. Not yet. She studied him. You say that phrase often. Not yet. I find it useful, he said simply. She turned her cup slowly in her hands. My village, my people. We followed you here because the old land was finished and you made a case with your eyes more than your words. I want you to understand something. She set the cup down and met his eyes. I will follow a fool exactly once, and I have already spent that once on you. The coals popped. The screen shifted. Don't waste it, she said, quieter, the iron softening just slightly. Kaito held her gaze. He did not flinch, did not perform confidence. He simply nodded once. Mama-san lifted her cup again. Tell me about the paddies. In the deep of night, the settlement slept. 5 buildings, the rope between the posts, the cloth still drying, the cook fire burned to nothing. Stars crowded overhead, thick the way they only looked this far from any city. Kaito sat outside with his back against a cedar post, not asleep and not quite awake, his eyes open and turned upward. In the capital, the stars had always been slightly obscured, by lantern smoke, by ceremony, by the weight of belonging to something enormous. Here they were simply there, every single one of them. He had not asked for this land, had not asked for Saya's trust, or Sora's hands, or Oji-san's quiet teaching, or even Mama-san's unforgiving faith. But they were here, all of them, on the same side of the same fire. Far off, 2 days east in a field shelter by a river bend, 6 people he had never met were sleeping in the cold, waiting for a cart that was coming. Far off to the north stood the mountains, the road, and something beyond it that had not yet announced itself. Kaito closed his eyes. The stars did not move, but everything else was already, quietly, beginning to.